You know life can hit you like a shotgun blast at close range, knocks you down, scatters your plans, and leaves you scrambling to pick up the pieces. For Phil Robertson, that moment came in the late 70s when he was drowning in whiskey, running, a failing bar, and watching his family slip through his fingers like a poorly tied fishing knot. He was a man lost in his own bad choices, but Phil didn't just stay down. He found faith, fought his way back, and built something bigger than himself, a duck call empire and a TV dynasty that preached family, faith, and the great outdoors. From the muddy swamps of Louisiana to the bright lights of Duck Dynasty, Phil's story is a wild ride of grit, redemption, and a whole lot of quack. But long before the cameras, the fame, and the bearded glory, Phil was just a kid in the bayou, chasing ducks and dreaming of a life as free as the wind over the Mississippi. From the bayou to the gridiron, a boy forged in the swamp. Macuray, a rickety house in Vivian, Louisiana, 1946. No electricity, no running water, just a family of 9 packed into a clapboard shack in the heart of Caddo Parish. Phil Alexander Robertson, born April 24, 1946, was the 5th of 7 kids to Merritt and James Robertson. His dad worked the oil fields and sharecrop to keep food on the table, while his mom stretched every squirrel, fish, or garden vegetable into a meal that could feed a crowd. "We didn't have money," Phil once said, "but we had the woods, and that was plenty." Growing up, Phil learned to hunt before he could spell, tracking deer with a .22 rifle and pulling catfish from the bayou with a homemade pole. The swamp wasn't just home. It was his school, his church, and his playground. School itself? That was another story. Phil was a fish out of water in the classroom, more interested in the flight patterns of mallards than algebra. Teachers at North Caddo High didn't know what to do with the lanky kid who'd rather skin a buck than crack a textbook. He'd sneak off to the woods during lunch, bow in hand, and come back with a grin and a story. But on the football field, Phil was a force. As quarterback, he could sling a pass with the kind of precision that made coaches take notice. He carried that talent to Louisiana Tech in 1964, where he started ahead of a scrappy kid named Terry Bradshaw. Yes, the future Pittsburgh Steelers legend with 4 Super Bowl rings. Phil was no bench warmer. He had NFL scouts circling, but the gridiron wasn't his heart. Football's a game, he'd say, but hunting's a way of life. So he walked away from a pro career, trading shoulder pads for waders, and a chance at glory for the call of the swamp. After college, Phil tried teaching and coaching at a local high school, but the structured life felt like a noose. He was too wild, too restless for lesson plans and chalk dust. He bounced around, running a commercial fishing boat, hauling nets through the muggy Louisiana dawn, and even dabbling in odd jobs like carpentry. Then came the bar. In the early 70s, Phil took over a dive in Arkansas, a rough joint where the beer was cold and the fights were hot. This was his outlaw phase, drinking hard, swinging fists, and living like tomorrow was somebody else's problem. One night, a brawl got so bad he decked a bar patron and had to hightail it into the woods to dodge the law. "I was a lowlife," Phil later admitted, chasing trouble and running from God. Those years weren't pretty, but they were forging. Something, grit, charm, and a survival instinct that would carry him through darker days and into the light. A family on the brink. The fight for redemption. In the midst of Phil Robertson's wild, whiskey-soaked years, one anchor held firm. Marcia K. Carraway, known to the world as Miss K, his high school sweetheart from the backroads of Vivian, Louisiana. They were just kids when they fell. In love, Phil, the lanky quarterback with a mischievous grin, and Kay, the girl with a laugh like a summer breeze, sneaking moments by the bayou under the watchful eyes of Caddo Parish pines. They started dating at 14, stealing kisses behind the schoolhouse and dreaming of a life bigger than the swamp. In 1966, when Phil was barely 20 and Kay was 18, they tied the knot in a simple ceremony, promising forever despite the odds. Their sons came quick. Alan in 1965, Jason 1969, Willie in 1972, and Jep in 1978, filling their modest home with the chaos of boys who inherited their daddy's love for the outdoors. But as Phil's life veered into darkness, that home teetered on the edge of collapse, and the family he cherished became the stakes in a battle he was losing to himself. By the late 70s, Phil was a man unmoored, running the wagon wheel, a rough-and-tumble bar in Arkansas that was more brawl than business. The bottle was his compass, and he was drinking as much as he poured, coming home late or not at all, with liquor on his breath and trouble in his eyes. Kay, left to raise 4 young boys in a house that felt emptier by the day, was stretched thin. She'd cook venison stew, mend hand-me-down clothes, and tuck the boys in with stories of their daddy's better days, all while praying through tears for the man she loved to come back to her. "I knew the Phil I married was in there somewhere," she'd later say, "but he was drowning and I couldn't reach him." The boys, too young to fully understand, felt the strain. Alan, the eldest, took on responsibilities no kid should, while Jace and Willie learned to hunt to escape the tension at home. Phil's wild streak wasn't just reckless, it was tearing apart the family he'd sworn to protect. The bar was a cauldron of chaos. Phil wasn't just serving drinks, he was living hard, picking fights, and flirting with disaster. One night in 1971, a brawl escalated beyond fists. A patron pushed too far and Phil's temper flared, landing a punch that sent the man to the floor. The law got involved, and Phil, knowing he'd crossed a line, fled to the woods, living like a fugitive among the cypress trees, surviving on fish and game while the heat died down. "I was running from everything, cops, God, myself," he'd later admit. Kay held the family together, but the strain was breaking her. She'd drive the boys to church, hoping faith would fill the void Phil left, but her patience was fraying. In 1975, she delivered an ultimatum that cut through the haze. "Phil, you change or you lose us. I can't do this alone anymore." It was a line in the sand, drawn with love and desperation, and it hit Phil like a cold splash of bayou water. That's when a local preacher, Bill Smith, entered the picture. Bill wasn't your typical Bible thumper. He was a straight, tight-talking man who knew the swamp and its sinners. He'd heard about Phil's troubles, everyone in town had, and saw a soul worth saving. One evening over coffee in a diner that smelled of grease and second chances, Bill sat Phil down and spoke plain. "You're throwing away everything that matters for a bottle and a fight. God's got a better plan, but you've got to choose it." Phil, hungover and hollow, listened. Something in Bill's words, maybe the truth, maybe the challenge, cracked the armor he'd built around his heart. In the summer of 1975, at 28, Phil waded into a muddy Louisiana river, the same waters where he'd fished as a boy and was baptized. It wasn't just a ritual, it was a rebirth, a moment that washed away the old Phil and gave him a shot at being the man his family needed. That baptism didn't fix everything overnight. Phil quit drinking cold turkey, a battle that tested his will, waking up shaking and sweating but determined to stay clean. He came home to Kay with apologies that carried the weight of years, tears in his eyes, promises on his lips. Kay, with a heart as big as the bayou, forgave him, not because it was easy, but because she saw the man she'd fallen for at 14 fighting to come back. "God and Kay gave me a lifeline," Phil would say, his voice thick with gratitude. "I didn't deserve either one." Together they rebuilt, brick by brick. Phil started teaching the boys to hunt, not just for game but for purpose, taking them to the blind to learn the calls of ducks and the value of family. He'd sit with Kay at night reading the Bible by lamplight, finding in its pages a roadmap to the man he wanted to be. This redemption wasn't just a personal victory, it was the spark that had ignited everything that followed. Faith became Phil's anchor, Kay his compass, and their boys the reason to keep going. The lessons learned in those dark years, humility, perseverance, love, would shape Duck Commander, Duck Dynasty, and a legacy that had touched millions. Phil's turnaround wasn't about erasing the past, it was about turning his mess into a message, proving that even a lowlife from the swamp could find his way home. Duck Commander, building an empire from a shed. Phil's always been a duck man. Growing up, he'd spend hours in the swamp studying the quack of a hen mallard, the whistle of a pinetail. By the early 70s, he was fed up with store-bought duck calls. Tiny, fake, nothing like the real thing. So he started carving his own, whittling cedar wood in a backyard shed until the sound was perfect. In 1972, he founded Duck Commander, a one-man operation fueled by obsession and a hunter's ear. He'd test calls in the blind at dawn, tweaking until they could fool a duck from 100 yards. To keep the lights on, he hauled fish commercially, pulling nets through the bayou while Kay managed the books and the boys helped package calls. Those early days were lean. Phil would drive to local bait shops, selling calls for a few bucks each, often throwing in a story or two about a hunt. Hunters love them, not just for the sound, but for the authenticity. A duck call ain't just a tool, Phil said. It's a conversation with nature. By the 80s, word was spreading, and Duck Commander was more than a side hustle. Kay turned their kitchen into a shipping hub, and the boys, barely teens, learned to carve alongside their dad. Phil started making hunting videos, rough VHS tapes shot with a borrowed camcorder. He'd blow a call, drop a duck, and preach his philosophy. Hunt hard, love deep, trust God. Those tapes, grainy as they were, showed Phil's charisma. Part woodsman, part sage, all Hart sons Jace and Willie saw bigger potential. Jace focused on the calls, perfecting designs, while Willie, the business-minded one, pushed for better branding and wider distribution. They got Duck Commander into sporting goods stores, and by the 90s they were selling instructional videos and early DVDs. Phil's on-screen presence, bearded, camo-clad, with a twinkle in his eye, made him a cult figure among hunters. By the 2000s, Duck Commander was a household name in the outdoor world, with calls in every major retailer from Bass Pro to Walmart. The shed had become an empire, and Phil was its grizzled king. The Duck Dynasty phenomenon, from swamp to stardom. In 2011, A&E came knocking with a wild idea, a reality show about the Robertsons and their duck call business. Phil wasn't impressed. "I don't need cameras following me to the duck blind," he grumbled, picturing Hollywood types trampling his swamp. But Willie, ever the visionary, saw a chance to share their values, family, faith, and fun, on a national stage. Kay backed him, and the boys signed on. Duck Dynasty premiered on March 21, 2012, and it was like tossing a match into dry grass. At its peak, 11.8 million viewers tuned in to watch the Robertsons hunt, cook, bicker, and pray. The show was a cultural juggernaut, blending redneck humor with heart. Phil was the show's soul. His one-liners, happy, 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 if it ain't in the Bible or the Constitution, it ain't worth a flip, became catchphrases printed on t-shirts and trucker hats. He'd sit at the head of the table, dishing out venison and wisdom, always closing episodes with a prayer that felt like a warm hug. Fans loved his rawness. No script, no polish, just a bearded guy who'd rather be knee-deep in a swamp than on a sound stage. The crew learned fast. Don't try to stage Phil. One director recalled him walking off set mid-shoot to go fishing, saying, "Oh, y'all got enough. I got base waiting." That authenticity was the show's magic. Duck Dynasty wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. The show ran for 11 seasons, 130 episodes, and turned Duck Commander into a $400 million empire. Merchandise flew off shelves. Duck, calls, camo gear, bobbleheads, even Duck Dynasty board games. Phil's net worth climbed to an estimated $10 to $15 million. But he'd shrug it off. "Money don't call ducks," he'd say. For him, the show was a platform to share his faith and family values, not a paycheck. Episodes often centered on simple moments. Phil teaching his grandkids to hunt, Kay cooking gumbo, or the boys pranking each other. But they resonated because they felt real. Phil's prayers at the end of each episode weren't just TV. They were his life, a testament to the faith that saved him. The 2013 controversy, standing firm in the fire. In December 2013, Phil Robertson's unfiltered tongue lit a match that set the cultural landscape ablaze. Duck Dynasty was at its peak, pulling in nearly 12 million viewers per episode. A juggernaut of camo-clad charm and family values. But when Phil sat down with GQ magazine for a no-holds-barred interview, he didn't hold back. In Louisiana, diner over coffee and biscuits. He shared his Christian beliefs on morality, sin, and modern society, including candid comments about homosexuality that he framed through his reading of the Bible. The quotes, raw, unpolished, and quintessentially, Phil hit the internet like a shotgun blast. Social media erupted. Headlines screamed. And A&E, the network behind Duck Dynasty, found itself in the eye of a cultural hurricane. On December 18, 2013, A&E announced Phil's indefinite suspension from the show, citing his remarks as offensive. For a moment, it looked like the bearded patriarch's TV days were done, and the Robertson empire might crumble under the weight of public outrage. But Phil, true to form, stood his ground, and his family stood with him, turning a crisis into a defining moment of resilience. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Progressive groups and media outlets branded Phil a bigot, with organizations like GLAAD condemning his words as harmful and out of touch. Twitter and Facebook buzzed with hashtags like #boycott Duck Dynasty, and op-eds dissected his comments as a relic of a backward mindset. The New York Times ran a piece calling the incident a clash of Hollywood values versus heartland beliefs, while CNN hosted heated debates about free speech and cultural sensitivity. For critics, Phil was the poster child of intolerance, a throwback to a less enlightened era, and his suspension was a victory for progress. But that was only half the story. Across the heartland, from rural churches to hunting lodges, a groundswell of support surged. Fans launched #Stand with Phil, a hashtag that trended worldwide, amassing over 250,000 signatures on online petitions within days. Facebook pages like Bring Back Phil Robertson popped up, racking up 1.6 million likes by Christmas. Supporters, hunters, conservatives, and everyday folks who saw Phil as one of their own, rallied, arguing he'd been punished for his faith and his right to speak his mind. Phil, sitting in his West Monroe compound, didn't flinch. "I said what I believe," he told reporters from his porch, his beard catching the winter light. "I love everybody, but I'm not going to change my Bible for a paycheck or a TV show." That was Phil, unapologetic, rooted in his convictions, with a stubborn streak as wide as the Mississippi. He wasn't trying to be a provocateur. He was just being himself, a man who'd never learned to filter his thoughts for a camera or a crowd. He'd grown up in a world where you said what you meant, whether it was about ducks or divinity, and he wasn't about to start playing Hollywood's game. His response wasn't polished. He didn't hire a PR firm or issue a carefully worded apology. Instead, he doubled down, speaking at a local church days later, saying, "I'll keep quoting scripture, and if that offends, so be it. I'm here to please God, not man." For his fans, that raw honesty was why they loved him. For his critics, it was fuel on the fire. The Robertson family didn't hesitate. Within hours of A&E's announcement, they released a statement that was as much a battle cry as a press release. "We cannot imagine the show going forward without our patriarch. Phil's beliefs are our beliefs, and we stand by him." Willie, the business-minded CEO of Duck Commander, took to Fox News saying, "We're a family, not just a cast. You don't split us up." Kay, the heart of the clan, told a local radio station, "Phil's not perfect, but he's ours and we love him." Even the younger Robertsons, Jace, Alan, Jep, and Willie's daughter Sadie, hit social media, sharing Bible verses and messages of unity. The family's solidarity wasn't just for show. It was a reflection of the bond Phil and Kay had rebuilt after years of struggle. They'd faced worse than a network suspension: Phil's drinking days, near divorce, fugitive nights in the swamp, and come out stronger. This was just another storm, and they weren't about to scatter. The controversy wasn't just about Phil. It was a cultural flashpoint, a microcosm of America's deepening divide. On one side, urban elites and progressive activists saw it as a chance to hold a public figure accountable. On the other, rural, conservatives and religious communities saw it as an attack on free speech and faith. Radio hosts like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity championed Phil, framing the suspension as political correctness gone mad. Meanwhile, Outlets like MSNBC debated whether Duck Dynasty's popularity revealed a troubling undercurrent in American values. The debate spilled into living rooms, church pews, and hunting camps, with Phil's bearded face at the center of it all. His influence was undeniable. One man's words had sparked a national conversation, and his show, already a ratings giant, became a symbol of something bigger. A&E blinked first. 9 days after the suspension, on December 27, 2013, the network announced Phil's return, citing overwhelming support from viewers and the show's importance to their lineup. The decision wasn't just about ratings, it was about money. Duck Dynasty was a cash cow, generating $400 million in merchandise sales, from duck calls to bobbleheads, and A&E wasn't ready to let that go. The Season 5 premiere in January 2014 drew 8.5 million viewers, a spike from the previous season, proving the controversy had only boosted the show's draw. Phil returned to the screen as if nothing had happened, blowing calls and praying at the dinner table, his grin a quiet middle finger to the suits who tried to bench him. The incident didn't just fade, it reshaped the Robertson legacy. For Phil, it was proof that standing firm could turn a crisis into a triumph. For the family, it was a testament to their unity, a bond forged in the swamp and tempered by faith. For fans, it was a rally cry, a reminder that their values had a voice. The controversy didn't break Duck Dynasty. It made it stronger, cementing Phil as a cultural icon. Not just a duck hunter, but a man who could spark a movement with a few unfiltered words. He'd later reflect, "I didn't set out to start a fight, but I won't run from one either." That was the heart of Phil Robertson, a patriarch who'd rather lose it all than bend, backed by a family who'd walk through fire to stand by his side. The patriarch's retreat, faith, family, and the call of the wild. By the time Duck Dynasty wrapped in 2017, Phil was ready to hang up his TV hat. In his 70s, he'd done his time in the spotlight and was itching to get back to the swamp. He handed Duck Commander reins to Willie and Jace, retreating to his 20-acre compound in West Monroe with Kay. Their home is a slice of paradise, part hunting lodge, part church, with a pond for fishing and a barn for family gatherings. Phil's still out there blowing a duck call at dawn or reading his Bible by the river. He teaches his 20-plus grandkids and great-grandkids to hunt, fish, and pray, passing down the lessons that shaped him. He's not done sharing his message. Phil co-hosts the Unashamed podcast with sons Al and Jace, reaching thousands with sermons that blend faith, humor, and swamp wisdom. His books, Happy 2013, Unfiltered 2014, and The Theft of America's Soul 2019, have sold over 1 million copies, mixing autobiography with his views on culture and Christianity. He speaks at churches, hunting expos, and conservative rallies, drawing crowds who see him as a symbol of living true to your roots. "I don't care about fame," he says. "I care about truth." The Robertson family keeps the legacy alive. Willie and Corey run Duck Commander and spin-off ventures like Duck Diner. Jace preaches and hunts. Sadie's a best-selling author and speaker. Jep produces media content. Their collective net worth, tied to Duck Commander, real estate, and media deals, is estimated at over $100 million. But Phil's proudest achievement is his family's unity. "I'd rather have a table full of kin who love each other than all. The Golden Fort Knox," he says. Kay, his partner through it all, remains his rock, hosting epic family barbecues where Phil's prayers still bring everyone together. The legacy that quacks. On Phil's story isn't just about duck calls or TV fame. It's about turning a mess into a message. From a wild kid in the bayou to a redeemed patriarch, he's proof that second chances can build empires. Duck Commander calls are still the gold standard, sold everywhere from Walmart to specialty shops. Duck Dynasty lives on in streaming platforms, like Amazon Prime and syndication, introducing new fans to Phil's quips and prayers. West Monroe hosts events like the Duck Commander 500, a stock car race that nods to the family's impact. Daughter-in-law Corey said, "Phil's not just a star, he's the glue that holds us together." His influence stretches beyond the outdoors. Phil's unfiltered take on faith and freedom resonates with millions who see him as a counterpoint to a polished, politically correct world. His books and podcasts keep his voice alive, while his kids and grandkids carry the torch through their own ventures. When asked about his legacy, Phil keeps it simple. I got my K, my kids, and my God. That's all I need. But his legacy is bigger than that. It's in the hunters who swear by his calls, the families who pray together because of his example, and the millions who saw a bearded guy from Louisiana and thought, that's real. So what's Phil Robertson's true legacy? His faith, his family, or the empire he built from a shed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. And don't miss these next videos just for you. Catch you in the next one.